humanidade se pergunta: por que as evoluções acontecem? As evoluções acontecem porque o mundo está em constante transformação. Acontecem porque a inovação é o que nos impulsiona a buscar soluções mais eficientes. As evoluções acontecem quando conectamos pessoas, comunidades e indústrias, transmitindo energia para todo o Brasil. Acontece porque a
Innovation
eficiência
happens because
e a
excellence
qualidade
and
são os
reliability
pilares
are the
que
pillars which
sustentam
sustain our
nossa
commitment with
sociedade.
society.
Somos mais
We're
do que
more than just a
produtos.
company of transmission.
Somos agente
We're
de
a transformation
transformação que
agents
impulsiona a
which
evolução de
supports energetic
nossa
transmission.
marca evoluiu para
Our
refletir essa
brand
transformação
evoluted to
e
reflect what we
transformar
most want to support and care for.
a
ISA
ISA
CETEP, which you
CETEP
know, is
agora
now
é ISA
ISA
Energia.
Energia,
Conexões que
connections
inspiram.
which inspire. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Investor Day. My name is Bruno Laurent. I'm the investor manager in ISA Brazil, and it's a pleasure to be the MC for this event today. For such important people that are following us today here in B3, in local, and online in the event's official platform or via YouTube. I would like to thank B3 for the partnership we developed and reinforced in these last few years, which allowed us to organize this event here in Arena B3 in such an important place for the company, since we're now turning 25 years, and it's a celebration period for us to be doing this here in B3. I'm going to speak a little bit about the dynamic of the event before we go into the presentations. We're going to divide this in two parts. First block, we're going to have a first block and then a 15-minute break, and then a second block, and then at the end of the presentations, we're going to have a Q&A session where we're going to receive the questions from who's here presential in B3 on site and for who's online. But for whoever's online, you can only make the questions via the official platform of the event. So if you are watching the transmission via YouTube and you want to make questions, you need to go to the official platform of the event, and you can do this via the QR code in the screen or via the link in the description in the YouTube video. Before we start the presentation, I need to do a disclaimer. The information in this presentation and the declarations during the event, via business point of view and by the what ISA Brazil wants to bring, is according to the company's beliefs and what they want to transmit. These are not assurances of the performance. They involve risks and premises and different issues. There are circumstances which may or not happen, which may affect its results. So having said this, I would like to start the presentation talking about safety, which is an extremely important topic for us. In 2024, we continued to secure safety program we had started on the previous years. And this wants to bring safety in the workplace in a proactive, integrated with the organization culture. And we don't just want to fulfill out norms and regulations, but we want to bring out a safety environment in the company, making all collaborators adopt security and safety as an unnegotiable value. And it's not just for so people to go back home safely, but also this brings benefits for the company, because besides creating a healthy environment and a safe environment, we create a culture of prevention, strengthens our reputation, and increases our productivity. Also in 2024, we begun the certification process of ISO 4501, which brings the certification of health and safety in the workplace. And this is key because this is something that I see in the day to day, and one of them is a commitment to leadership. I see this in the day to day of our workplace, and we really see this as very important in the day of the company. And these are elements that are in the day to day of the management of the company. And I like to highlight that um, all all our norms are part of the scope in our company, which needs to be concluded throughout the next year. I like to close the safety part, bringing us a phrase that Tui said in one of our safety events, which I thought it was very interesting. Security is not a priority for us. Safety is a value because priorities we can change according to the needs of the company, according to the moment of the company. So the values are something that are intrinsic, they are something that come from inside the company. And it establishes how we're going to do our activities and how we're going to behave in the company. And so I'd like to pass now to Husham, the president of Energia Brazil. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here in the first investors meetings in Energia Brazil. Bringing a little bit more details about what our event's going to be about. It's going to be a little bit different of what you guys are used to. Usually we do a series of presentations and then we open for questions and answers. Yes, I will do a quick presentation about Energia Brazil, and then two of our experts are going to do a brief presentation about the scenario and the electric development in Brazil. Renato Guimarães will do this presentation, and Victor Nakashima, another expert of our company, will do a presentation through the perspective of Energia Brazil, how we see the scenario. And then we have something different. Usually when we have the events with investors, it's very common that the last questions of an analyst of the buy side or sell side, they always say, is there something I'm not asking? Is there some question I missed? And we collected many of the most difficult questions that we've been receiving. And we're going to do a session of Q&A based on these questions. And at the end, in case we forgot any questions, if you guys have any compliments you guys need, we're going to open for questions and answers for all of you who are here with us in the Arena B3 or online, according to what Bruno explained. So we'd like to start a presentation now. It's a very special moment for us. Our brand evolved. We're not Isa Setap anymore, and I'm sorry if any of our colleagues or if I slip again. We have been using this brand for a long time, but today we're Energia Brazil. We're management of concessions of energy transmissions in Brazil, which are impulsing or supporting the transmission in the country with a lot of ambition to continue going forward. This doesn't change our values at all. This is to reaffirm who we are and who we've been, and reinforces our values and the companies that you already know. We like saying that the evolving of the company, it brings the brand to where we already are with commitment. I don't know if it's my return. Okay, he's having a little sound technical issue. But it's our commitment with people, environment, society, and investors. And I'm going to bring a question that people have been asking a lot. We've evolving the brand, but we're not changing corporate governance of the company. We don't want to go into generation or distribution of energy like someone in the press asked me yesterday. We are reaffirming what we are, our values of servicing society in what is our business. Isa Setap, which you know now, is called Energia Brazil. Welcome to this new moment of the company. It's a pleasure to share this with you guys. Well, for you who are investors or analysts, the company changes name, and the ticker also changes the name. So from September, November, TRPL will be ESA E3, ESA E4 for our stocks, ordinary and preferential stocks. So please pay attention to this. We're organizing a communication for all the investors for you guys to have a reinforcement of this message. But this is the complement of our communication in this ticker change. Who are we today? We're a company with 34 concessions in Brazil, in 18 states of the federation. 35 concessions, 7 of them are still being built, with a portfolio who's been growing rapidly. In the last few years, we've been bringing a growth strategy based in 2 pillars: investments in improvements and investments in new bids. At the same time, the company since 2017 has more intensively been receiving through assets, non-depreciated assets from the concession of 2012, which was called RBSE. So the slide that's here, which you can see, we have the evolution of the progress of the company from the RTP in 2018, and then RTP, which was just consolidated now in the middle of the year. We have an evolution of the ingress. And when we projected the next RTP from 2018, what are we planning? And then it will be very clear the materialization of the strategy we've been drawing out since we launched our strategy in 2030 in 2018, 2019. The investments in reinforcements and improvements continue to grow. And so in the concession in São Paulo, which is a dark blue, increases in relevance according to our ingresses. In our bids, where we're going to invest 9 billion between now and 2029, it's going to bring to the company another 1 billion of ingresses when the works are finished. At the same time that the RBSE financial in 2028 will lose some relevance. When we see this movement and the materialization of the portfolio and the reinforcement and improvements, which we're going to detail a little bit more, and the new bids that we have that are being built, we're going to have into 28, we're going to have concessions of 30 years in the new bids with constant cash flow. We're going to have improvements materializing until the end of the Paulista concession, which will compensate the RBSC, which we've been receiving the last few years. So that's the materialization of the strategy that we've been showing you. Now we're very focused in executing this with a lot of discipline, and we're sure we're going to bring a lot of value for the investors and stockholders. I'd like to call now Renato Guimarães, one of our experts, which will talk about the tendencies of the sector. Renato, please. Thanks so much, Rui. Good morning, everyone. My name is Renato Guimarães. I coordinate the expansion and study areas of the company. And for me, it's a great pleasure to be here with you guys talking about the evolution and the challenges that the electric sector has been facing. We've been living a great change in the world in the way we produce energy and the way we consume energy. This great change is associated to the need we've been seeing of migrating from the usage of fossil fuels to technologies which are considered clean. We've observed in this last decade a lot of growth of the materialization of energy transition. We're going to arrive to the end of the decade with about 40% of energy produced in Brazil with new sources, wind through wind turbines and solar energy. What happens when we migrate the generation of sources, which are mostly from hydroelectrics and thermoelectrics, we have a reduction of our capacity of storage. So what is important for us to retain of this last information is when we arrive to 2030, we're going to have a reduction when we consider the beginning of the decade when we were 98% of our capacity of storage, of energy storage with hydroelectrics and a little bit of thermal. We're going to reduce this to about 60%. And this energy production and this wind and solar production have interesting and important characteristics which will impact the transmission operations. Here, when we consider solar energy productions, this energy production has been characterized by the distribution, energy transmission is like what is generated by house roofs, and it's linked directly to the distribution. And this growth went from 0 to 24 gigs. And this distributed energy, when it comes to the operation of the system, brings an impact, which is the national electric operator. He can't really see this charge when he's operating the system. When we consider this graph to the right in the bottom, we say this is the curve of system load. So is when we consume the energy, especially when it comes in summer because it's more elevated in the afternoon and at night. And when we consider the solar energy, it happens throughout the day. It has its peak in the mid-afternoon. And since this energy is linked to the transmission system from the back end, the effect is what we call a liquid load. It's the effective load minus the distributed, which gets around the lunch hour, it comes to very low levels. So if you look at this graph in the left in the screen, we're going to see that it seems like a duck shape, and that's why we call it a duck movement. So the system needs a flexibility, because when you get to the end of the afternoon, the solar energy starts reducing. And the operator of the system needs to be ready to bring new sources of energy, other sources, to supply this difference, this reduction of energy, which was coming from the solar energy. And for this, you need the essential distribution system. It's true that the operator has already lived this in other situations. This isn't something new to live with flexibility. Here I'll bring an example on the graph to the right, which is a game in the World Cup in 2010.
And the blue curve, it's the load curve normal on a normal day back then. And then the orange curve represents what happened with the system when it started the game. So people stopped their activity, the industry reduced activity, the loads went down. And when we came the break, there's a slight addition. And when the game stopped the game, people went back to their normal activities, and the curve stayed as likewise the ramp of the duck, as I showed. Normally, when these things happened in big events, World Cup, as an example, the end of a soap opera, Vasco teams game. But now what happens? This happens on a daily basis in the system. In fact, when we look the chart on the left-hand side, we see a World Cup on a daily basis, and the operator must be prepared to face this challenge. And the transmission system or delivery system, it's key for us to experience this situation. So see, the delivery system, power delivery system, has as characteristics as to be complementary to the sources. This is wind generation in the northeast, south of Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul, wind generation in the north, southeast, and so forth. So it's necessary for this generation to be available for the operator when the load requires it. And when does he do so? Through the power delivery system. So on the left-hand side, we see the projection for 028, how the system operations is impacted by this change on the scenario of generation throughout the day. So the blue bars are the generations throughout the day, and impacted on lunchtime by solar generation. The darker blue, it's the load of southeast region. And during lunch break, southeast, it's self-sufficient, self-dealing. But when it's 6 p.m. and evening, it is necessary for the power delivery system to do the interconnection of the system so we can cater for the load that it's needed and safety needed for the system. So now when we talk about the reduction of storage capability, what this impacts truly the system. When we reduce the capacity of storage of the system, this means that we lose our capability of supplying tension to deliver any power for the load at a certain moment. So the capacity of the system to meet the load at the exact time. And then there are projections that by 2027, especially this time on the ramp upwards, we will have a bit of need regarding, or better say, lots of necessity to increase capacity of storage by the system. So when we reach 034, we are talking about 35 gigas to be added to be able to have enough tension, especially at this time at the ramp 6 p.m. So paying attention to this. It launched by the beginning of this year some bids for thermal and hydro capability reserved, and now recently it launched in the public consultation regarding the reserve of capacity plus the storage system, more feasible now the batteries, as we have seen throughout the timeline. Opportunities of delivery is being materialized, especially regarding at the beginning of these decades with the growth of generation. We can increase the capacity of power delivery to acquire the available generation. And as of this renewable energy, clean, cheap, becomes available, we notice also growth regarding the way how demand for energy appropriates itself of this sort of energy to do the developing electro-intensive industry or changing the way we consume energy throughout the day. So we started to notice growth of data centers, and I will talk further about it now. Also batteries. As I mentioned, we have bidding for capability reserve for the system and hydro energy and the green energy. Now, talking more about data centers, what we have experienced throughout the world, it's a growth of the need regarding this type of load earmarked for. Now we have increasingly more interconnection of people, businesses, development of AI, and we have seen a migration of these data centers in USA, Europe, and other countries, and Brazil, a destiny for absolutely certain for this sort of investment because it's an electro-intensive industry. Most of its need of data centers or inputs for data centers is electric energy, and we are seeing a movement towards requests for interconnection. Currently, we have authorized by the Ministry of Mines and of Energy approximately 2.5 gigabytes. The 2.5 gigabytes is an investment of by demand starts small and grows with time. So we 2.5 in 2037 of this 2.6 of CETEP system, ISO Energy Brazil. And when we talk about green hydrogen, likewise, we also have seen a development of the market for green hydrogen. Brazil is a promising country. Electricity is used to electrolysis of water to break down water, molecule hydrogen and oxygen. And as we have a generation of energy that almost, or 90%, in fact, the source is renewable, and intrinsically wise regarding the rules of the European Union, the hydrogen under these conditions, low carbon and green, intrinsically wise. So Brazil, it's the natural destiny for this sort of investment. And then these investments are related to normally the generation of wind or solar generation, but it must be interconnected to the grid. So we have some requests by the Ministry of Mines of Energy that are huge, in the order of almost 36 gigabytes. The demand of Northeast is 16, just to have an idea. So you see the size. We're studying the see how to fit accordingly the system in order that we can clearly build a system of power delivery that is fit for use. And as the hydrogen can be developed in the country, we might have an inward of the production of green hydrogen, and this might present good opportunities for power delivery and building the fit for use or suitable system for use. Now, when we talk about investments being made and increase, consolidation and strengthening, we have the 10-year plan 2034 and public consultation, and this plan has investments 129 billion reais. Of this 129 billion reais, basically 150 granted works. We already had some biddings during the last years in the order of 60 billion and 40 billion future investments forecasted. In this power plan, energy plan, there's some sort of limit constraints to show this future 2034, several conditions posed, and I like to do the patch belt, which is a document drawn every 6 months by EP. It's a plan that sets it's for 6 years and long-term onwards, that does not impose limits regarding years, and with a higher number of investments, approximately 34 billion. Of these, approximately 9 billion are reinforcements. Of the 9 billion, we have mapped 1.1 within the concessions of ISO Brazil. Now, in addition to re-strengthening and enlargements, we also have the need to improve the system. The mapping made a few years ago by ANEEL identified 39 billion of assets with working life regulatory overcame between 2025 and 2034, and being that when we talk, it's important point when we talk at the end of regulatory working life, service life, regarding assets. When we look the base of Paulista, São Paulo's concession, we have 6.6 billion investments in your remuneration base paid in, and approximately 17.7 billion investments totally depreciated. What doesn't not mean that necessarily we will have to replace all these assets. We do a diligent work on management of assets. We see cost, risk, and performance to have this financial discipline to replace the assets whenever necessary. And when we do so, what we are doing is replacing equipment we understand no longer working conditions to be operational for those more modern, and we do the monitoring of assets, and we have digital systems imposed of the last generation and more smart. We did the first substation digital 4.0 of Brazil set up with this eye of revamping the system. And evidently, this replacement increased resilience of assets. We are looking how to face climate changes, bringing those assets more resilient. And all this I have just mentioned regarding the power delivery system also goes through the importance of having an increase of flexibility of power delivery system. I talked a lot about the power delivery system. This is being flexible is essential to have it in the system, and we need to increase tech innovation within power delivery, bringing new technologies in order that we can have more flexibility as needed. So use of batteries, FACTS, FTCs, so controls, tech development that we are looking for, and power delivery system needed for facing all these challenges posed by the electric sector currently. So ending my presentation, all I said, well, the power delivery system is essential to materialize energy transition. Not possible for us the way we do energy and consume energy without having a power delivery system that's modern, efficient, safe, and resilient. And to tell a bit how Brazil Energy has appropriated of the energy transition, looking for opportunities, I invite my friend Kashima to share this with you. So thank you for your attention. Well, good morning. Thank you, Renato, for the fantastic introduction. I'm so pleased to be here with you today. I will talk how the energy transition, the context is impacting the sector, opportunities being created, and how this has impacted Energia Brasil. And I'm Vitor Nakashima. Well, first, summarizing all the landscape described by Renato, within energy transition is clear to all. We have increasingly more having the participation of renewable sources and non-controllable, several wind centrals, solar centrals, and also the distributed generation that Renato shared with us, representing 30% of the installed load in Brazil. Outcome of this is the reduction of the controllable sources participation. More and more, the reservoirs of huge hydropower plants that historically were a mattress to absorb any changes in the load has less representative. So within this context, it's interesting to have the resources like the batteries or flexible technologies in order to cater for this demand more and more variable. Another point presented by my friend was regarding the ramp of net load more and more sharp. What is net load? It's the gross our consumers consume less the generation that's not controlled by ANS. So it's wind and solar generation. Outcome, it's the net load, which effectively ANS should cater with controllable resources. Within this scenario of transition and more a generation that's renewable generation, not controllable, and that has a more stake in the generation, we have to face challenge. And over offer energy in some moments, we have low load. So quite interesting for us to get the situation of Northeast during the wee hours. During this time, naturally, there's a lower load in the system, and we have a huge generation, wind generation. Within this landscape, east is exporting to the southeast, but wind generation has increased in such a way that even though with the power delivery system is integrated, we have a load in the southeast to absorb all this generation, and in some moments the generators have faced some curtailments or constraints of due to energy reasons. So we have to demand the renewable energy because we don't have the load to consume this energy. So it's a sad thing. So we have opportunity of resources to optimize this energy of this renewable energy, so clean, so cheap that today in the share is waste. Another thing that also it's a huge challenge, as Renato mentioned, we have currently other drivers of growth for demand, especially data centers, green hydrogen, that will, in a long, medium term, will happen. So regarding that, of the moment you request the access to the Ministry of Mine of Energy, it is concretized 2-3 years, which is a fast pace phase to the normal term of expansion for power delivery. So for an idea, the electric sector has between planning and put into motion in trade, it takes approximately 7 years. So study advised by EPA, bidding and building all this term, it takes approximately 7 years that end by a mismatch between systemic need and speed of implementation, put into retail of these assets. But also we cannot keep on building these assets in a fast pace with the problem of investment, because part of this load will not become concrete. Therefore, the biggest challenge regarding sector planning is being able to expand the system in the right pace in order not to constrain the growth of the market, but also not to penalize consumers who will foot this bill by the end due for loads that were just speculation. Therefore, all this landscape will generate a huge opportunity both for storage technology as well as flexible technology, I will talk later, that has put into motion pace very fast compared to the traditional ones for power delivery. Now, the first topic I would like to share with you is regarding capacity reserve bidding that Renato mentioned, disclosed by the government. The government currently foresees a bidding that will take place in June 2025, specifically for batteries. So the government understood that technology for batteries is reliable, widely used abroad, and it's worth for us to have a specific bidding for this technology to cater for the load point in the system. Interesting inserts regarding transmission, the power delivery system. So you can look in Registro project. It caters for the local load peak points during New Year's, Carnival, and so forth. They are catered by these batteries. And here, the biggest purpose of the capacity reserve bidding is also to cater to the peak of load of the system. So it's an opportunity for batteries that presents its first singularity regarding the power delivery system. So why do I stress these singularities? Because currently, by the end of October, we close the public consultation in the Ministry of Mine of Energy, and the draft place for the contribution of society would not address what would be the granting modality. So the absence, the storage energy agent. Today, we don't know which segments of the electric sector can be part of this bidding.
It will be the transmission agent in itself, will be the distribution, commercialization. We're not sure. But us from SETAPI, we understand that there are a few similarities between this kind of agreement and the transmission in itself. So that since the technical application is very similar, we have a remuneration which is fixed by the availability of the asset, and the agent won't receive for the commercialized energy. So it's a lot of similarity with the transmission segments where we're paid for the availability of our assets. So the previsibility of this agreement the agent will be responsibilized if he's not in operation and if he's in operation and not available for the system. Besides this, talking about why the ministry and the ANS understand that it's better for us to have a certain agreement for this kind of energy in itself. Here we have a capex curve from the last decade of this technology. We can see that the annual reduction of lithium batteries was minus 16% per year. So we went from 2013 going to 2023 to $139. This is all being pulled from the electric modality. Today's common for us to go through the streets of São Paulo and see a series of electrical vehicles. There's even some Ubers who already use this technology and have very interesting autonomy and start reducing pollution in the great metropolis. And this is important in the market as it creates a demand, elevated demand, where the application also is benefited by this market generation. And also there's a second benefit, which is the second life. So these batteries that are used in the electric batteries, in the electric cars, there's a first series of studies to see what are the needed equations to reuse car batteries in stationary usages, which are less critical for this kind of technology. So we believe this technology is already present and is going to be more and more a part of our future. Now, talking a little bit about facts, what are they? They're devices of electronic attention, which we can put in the transmission. And one thing that to highlight is the speed of implementation and the flexibility of these assets. Now, the marriage of load and growth of transmission systems is more and more important for us to have quick implementation assets, which are modular, and we can quickly move about. So looking at this graph in the right about the concept, what are facts, talking about smart valves specifically. We have a park which needs to transport this energy via 3 transmission lines until a big consuming area. So there were 3 paths. The electric, when it has these 3 paths, which is going to choose the one that has less effort, which is going to tire less. So understand that the top line is having an overcharge, an overload. The red line, it has 50% of its nominal capacity, and the bottom line only has 28% load. So this, without the smart valve, we have 3 transmission lines, which one is overloaded, and 2 which are relatively not being used, which is a waste for transmission. And what would be a way for us to optimize the transmission of this energy? Through the smart valves themselves. So when we put this equipment in an adequate fashion, what would be the second situation? We can balance the energy transmission from the generation part to the consuming, so we can optimize our transmission. So seeing in the second pictures, after we install the smart valves, we have a transmission of 98%. So we have all of them in their nominal limit and very well used. I think an easier way for us to understand this concept, I'm going to explain in another way. Let's imagine that I'm an electron and I want to get to where my colleague Renato is. If you can please raise your hand. So what would be the easiest way for me to go up this stairs? I have four steps to get there. It's much easier for me to get to Renato through this path. There's another path which I'm not sure if you guys can see. I could go up the stairs, go all the way around the arena, and then come down. But I'm a smart electron, so I want to use less effort. So I'm going to go up these 4 steps. But if I had escalator, which would make me go up the first step, and they would transport me without any effort all the way to Renato, I think I would go through this path because I wouldn't have to do any effort. So artificially, my effort and my path was reduced. And who's the smart valve in this play? is this escalator. So I think now it's clear how the smart valves can reduce artificially this effort and this resistance of the paths and make the smart electrons have less resistance to go through the path they need. So now coming back to our transmission application, we have a study from IPEC, which was published recently, which foresees the implementation of new smart valves in the region of Ribeirão Preto as a as a as a temporary provision, and they will be transferred to São José do Rio Preto with smart valves. So I think it's evident that the mobility of this technology. So it starts in a region in Ribeirão Preto and solving an emergency problem which we couldn't reinforce our transmission lines to support the systemic need. And in parallel to the implementation of the smart valve, SATEP is going to rebuild this line, increasing the transmission capability. And after the works are done, we're going to get these 9 equipment and take them to another region, São José do Rio Preto, which is going to service until the end of its lifetime. So this is shows the capability of this modularity of this technology, and this is a 93 million investment, which is regulatory and recognized here by ANEL. Talking also a little bit about data centers and how this has impacted the transmission systems in SETEC. Today we have 22 requests of access, which have been documented in the ministry, and 10 of them have been approved. And this has been issued by the Ministry of Energy and Mines. And this corresponds to about 3.4 gigawatts. And of these access, 10 of these 10 approved corresponds to over 10 gigs. So these loads have a big demand. Most of them, for you to have an idea, they have a demand of half a gig. So they're concentrated here in the state of São Paulo, in the region, in the metropolitan area, in the Barueri region. There's a hub of data centers there. In the regions of Piracicaba, Campinas, and Araraquara. And APE also foreseeing this connection, which has been happening very quickly, made 2 studies. One is the R1 of the study of the metropolitan area of São Paulo. There's R1 of Campinas, Jardim, and Itatiba, and together they're recommending 601 million of investment, regulatory investment, in reinforcement to the transmission system of SETEP. So as transmission, we've been already impacted in terms of growth and demand of the systems of the company. Okay, this is the part I had to talk about today. Thank you all for your attention. I'd like to call my colleague Bruno now. Well, thank you, Renato, Vitor, Rui. I'd like to thank you all for your presentations. I think this was very interesting for all of us. At least for me, it was very interesting. I'd like to call a break now. We're going to have 15 minutes. So I'd like to invite all of you to have some coffee, exchange messages, check your emails, and we'll be back in 15 minutes to continue with the event. Thanks so much. Não abre?
Não,
Que doido.
ainda bem que você pôde abrir.
Só vou encostar.
É melhor não saber disso.
Não começou ainda. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for waiting. Now we'll continue our event. And I'd like to call to the stage our executive directors so we can continue with our event. So please, Bruno Zolani, Operations Director, Claudio Domingarena, Regulation, Strategy, and Innovation Director, Darren Moreno, Project Manager, Project Director, and our CEO, and our Financial and Investors Relations Director, while they accommodate in their places, although we already gave the spoiler. I'm going to explain the dynamic. We're going to have a sequence of questions and answers where we prepared, we brought some questions together of what we most receive, and I'm going to be the analyst, which will be making the questions without getting distracted from our scope. I like to start here, seeing your presentation, Renato's presentations, and Vito's presentation. I'd like to understand with you, if Energia wants to go into another segment beyond energy transmission. Thank you for your question, Bruno. More than to reinforce my first questions, that we're not planning on investing in generation or distribution of energy. I think it's good for us to comment. Why is the brand evolving? We were a company known by multiple names. Some of you guys called us CETEP, others Paulista Transmission, who invested in stocks, new PL 4, PL 3, less, and we would always say is a CETEP. So this created various personalities, and for the investors, this created disconnection. And so from what we wanted to communicate, and then for every investor and part of the society, different things came about. So we brought one brand so that the communication of the company with society is more efficient. And this has important collateral effect, which is to attract talents more easily. So we believe that by being ISA Energy Brazil and communicating ISA Energy Brazil, it's going to be easier for the company to attract the best talents to work with us. So this is our objective of the evolution of the brand. There's behind this, there's no strategy change, just evolution of the company, which adopts its only one personality, which is ISA Energia Brasil. Thank you so much. Rui. In the presentations, I think it was very evident also the change of the generation of energy law, very linked to energy transmission and the reduction of carbon emissions. I'd like to understand with you, Bruno, regarding the extreme climate events, which we've been seeing more and more in Brazil. Recently, we've had floods in Rio Grande do Sul, fires in São Paulo, floods in Brazil, events in Brazil, fires in the Pantanal. And I'd like to understand with you two things: how these events impacted the operation of the company, and the other thing is, how are we being prepared for this event, how we're adapting. Thank you so much, Bruno. Good evening, everyone. So climate events is a very present theme now in the sector. You said very well now, you said about severe climate events. We're talking about storms, fires, and floods, and we've had operations all throughout Brazil. So our assets haven't suffered any interruptions in the continuity in the providing of energy throughout this period, but we are still very aware and with agile response plan to act with agility to bring any system that we might need. When we're talking about climate strategy, I'm going to divide the second part of the answer in two themes. One is mitigation. What are we doing in regard to mitigation? We reduced the scope of emissions of FS6 since 2022 about 50%. FS6 is a gas which is used a lot in the energy transmission, and we reduce the usage using innovation and maintenance techniques. And this is when we're talking about mitigation. When it comes to adaptation, we have one is a contingency plan. At the end of the day, when something is materialized with this intensity, the first answer comes in the agility to bring about the system back online through infrastructure. We have stocks of towers, emergency towers, helicopters, machinery which are available to use, and we use technology, meteorology, updated forecasts to act if we need. And then we also have an adaptation with looking at the long term. We work with 7 risks, threats based on science. These we have threats of winds, heat waves, storms, and mudslides to do studies of vulnerability, impact, and exposition and exposure of our assets. We put this on a risk matrix, which we're finishing the consolidation to start a mitigation plan, and this is built not where we don't build this alone. It's jointly, and this act has a joint action with the regulator. And this is very important for us to say that when we're talking about climate adaptation, it's not some that Energia advances on its own. You need reliability and collision with different parties. Perfect. Thank you. What about the project with the company, the Lance in Acre? Is it linked to this climate adaptation? Thank you, Bruno. The company has a flag company called Jaguar. This is disconnected from our operation. It is part of our ambition to contribute positively so that the forest can be preserved or in some cases even replanted. So now we have 2 projects in the Jaguar connection, one in Brazil. We have 2 projects, one in the Pantanal, which we've had for about 2 years with the Instituto Pantaneiro. And now this one in Acre, which we're doing with Think Climate, which is a fund which works with the preservation of the land. So they work in this area in the river Uru. So it's not linked, which was talked to by Bruno, but it's part of our responsibility to generate positive social change, which goes beyond our borders. Thank you. Perfect. I'd like to bring about a slide from your presentation, which you commented about the materialization of strategy. And from what you said, the tendency we have is that the next RTP, our investments will be enough to compensate for the end of the financial RTP, for the end of the RSB, the financial RSBC. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about this point, about what are the premises that you guys consider to put this tendency, and what are the risks that you see for not fulfilling this result in 2028. Thank you for going back to my point, Bruno. In the beginning, I talked about how we collected some questions that we received from analysts. And this question is usually asked in this elegant way the Bruno brought about, and sometimes it's asked, I want to see when this financial RBSC finishes. Doubting about what is the perspective of the company in the long range. And that's why I brought this about, because in 2019, when we brought the financial plan, we had a plan to continue growing. And when we talk about growth, we talk about 3 dimensions: generate value for the stockholder, corporate longevity, and positive environment impact. Look at the first 2 points which we talk about. Longevity talks about concessions, which gives us cash flow, which is forecastable for the next few years, which allows us to continue reinvesting this value. And this we've been doing. With the resources from the financial RBSC, we increment our capacity for investment and transform this in assets which serve society and at the same time brings us income. Today, we have a portfolio of 14 billion reais to be invested in the next 5 years. These 14 billions are composed of 5 billion of reinforcements and improvements, and they will be invested in the next 5 years. This year, we already invested an important sum of about 1 billion until September, and now we have another 5 billion to be developed in the Paulista concession, and 9 billion to complete the 7 assets that we have under development. When we see the evolution of these cash flows, which we see in the graph in dark blue and light blue, we see they tend to compensate the reduction, especially of the financial RBSC, which will finish being paid in 2028. So this question, done in such a polite way, the Bruno did, or a very questioning way, it shows that we have a solid capacity of fulfilling this out. And now with the last RTP that was presented in the beginning of the year shows our execution capacity and shows the projects will have important track records and follow through after the implementation period.
So the answer for this question, the doubt or lack of trust or rather in the company, I guarantee that this is an ongoing source of attention of our strategy and its implementation throughout the timeline. So thank you, Claudio. Following this line, talking about RTP, what is your expectation for RTP? And can we expect something similar to what we saw with the previous one that ended by 2024? Good morning, Bruno. Let's level RTP. The periodic tariffs. So we cater 34 contracts, 33 are bidded contracts. Of this, the tariff variation does not bring huge variations, is offset by the inflation rate. So what we call we 15 now we call Paulista concession, the legal contract, the main contract of the company. It goes through the review of tariffs from time to time, where we review the main components of the composition of our entrances and offsets of assets, and therefore. So in the chart, we are showing what happened during the last tariff cycle. The reference date was 2023, and what would happen the current year, 2024. We invested 1.3 billion reais, booked value updated by IPC. So the VNR, value reposition VNR homologated, approved. So this variation brought an increment of 89% and a coefficient of positive reassessment, and the value recognized and incorporated for the calculation of tariff was 2.5 billion reais. Of course, this is 89% of this figure that calls the attention, but it's a figure that is explained by three main reasons, being first, efficiency. So we are doing efficient investments pari passu with the market. This brings a benefit and recognition that is plus once we can execute investments below the average of the market. To have an idea, the first cycle 2008, the assessment index was 33%. Now we have a component regarding the inflation. First, the pandemic, which triggered prices upwards, and also heating up of the market for power delivery that also brought an increase to prices. So when we enter OAT, we have the contracted projects, paid projects, and when we do the updating of this value already booked to 2023, then we enter with all this inflation gain. So this coefficient was raised beyond what was happening. For 2028, we don't have, thank God, another pandemic event, and we don't foresee to have another trigger in the same pari passu. So we understand it will be a coefficient that will represent our efficiency regarding bank and price, but will not reach 89%. 89%. So the evolvement of our remuneration, depreciation value, where we have applied the regulatory number to regulate this number. In 2023, when we renewed the contract, we have a remuneration of 7.35 billion. Updated figures to the same date, of course, 2024. This period of 13-18 is very complicated regarding regulatory definitions. We will not see the RBSE was not being repaid. So then we, as the remuneration of this contract based on depreciation, it was reduced by depreciation in 2018, the base of 6.47. 2018, a different scenario, receiving RBCN and tariff review defined. We reviewed the investment plan, also the technical need called for renewing the assets. So here, 2018, 2023, we overcome investments and depreciation, and the net base starts to grow and reaches 6.59 million. Now, going to 2028, Bruno, we, as mentioned, the investment is more than 5 billion reais for this contract. So we are investing more than 2 times the depreciation. So the base will grow. So 5B base, 6.59 net base. So this will bring an important increment regarding the ingress of the company. Claudio, if you allow me, Bruno, I would like to add to what Claudio mentioned regarding renewing 2028. Regarding the event with investors, I would like to share the point of view of the operation. This contract for concession, Paulista, there are assets from the 70s. We need to move forward and renew these assets from the 70s for reliability and render the proper service, suitable service. So this is time to share this with you all. Thank you. Now, talking about investments in reinforcement and in improvements, we have talked for some time that there is 5B for investments already authorized. Bruno mentions 5B for the next 5 years. So how are the changes advancing the authorizations? Well, it seems a timely answer, but it's not. 5B never changes. It's from last year, it's still 5B. What's happening? Well, just to shed light on this point, we started the year with 5 billion authorized projects in reinforcement and improved. We have executed 1B by September, but at the same time, we received other authorizations, totally 1.1 billion. By the end, we keep on more or less with the same balance, approximately 5B with a different composition, because it is like cycle inventories. The total is not varying, it's turning over all the time. So reflecting the need, ongoing need of renew assets that Bruno mentioned, because these assets, it's not an option to do or not. It's a need technically wise. So this is something that will happen. It won't stop in 5 billion. If you ask, well, why should I project ahead in this timeline? Because it will happen actually. And this type of concession, renewable concession, it has some peculiarities regarding the distribution model. Distribution, as it calls recurrently to distribute, there's a regulation regarding the base movement, write-off assets, depreciation, very similar. So when we talk about modeling of delivery, we talk the multiple of CAPEX and QRR, which is regulatory reintegration quota. No one projects just the pipeline and stops. This power delivery of concession is similar. So in this chart you see now, we have here how it's planned to do with the 5P in the dark blue and light reaching 029, but this will, more things will enter as time goes by. So it's the suitable parameter. I think the patamar of the level of 1 billion per year, they think it's the fit one. And why the market should project something that it's not yet authorized? Why? Is it not just what's authorized? No. This, in fact, is due to the need that we know it's going to happen. So, therefore, not placing this, I think it would be not taking into account something we know it's going to happen. And Bruno could add a bit regarding the management and assets management planning, and also take into account improvements. It's part of the management of the company. It does not depend of authorization. Yes, Silvia. If you allow me to talk about the overview regarding assets management, if I could put in a nutshell what is as really big highlights of for us, it's paying the assets working live, reducing operational risks and costs also. With this, we have a clear policy that allows me with health index that we have based in technical parameters of working life, of assets, failure rate, assets in operation. We can clearly know the assets requiring to be replaced throughout the next 10 years. So we have a matrix or chain operation parameter and allocation of resources for these investments. As Silvia mentioned, that's key. And additionally, that aids to the subject that there are some doubt, the many questions regarding and the termination, expiring the concession contract indemnization. We will reach a high depreciation level of about 0.42, but clearly the renewal extended contract, there's an indemnization by the end of it. And there's no debate regarding indemnization, and it's clear on the regulation today we see on the contract that went to be bidded. The contract that is expiring was by Engine Batch 1, and the winning company will pay the residual value of this contract. It's 40 million contracts, huge contract, but it's clear by the end of the concession, not depreciated value will be indemnified by the new value of reposition and not accounting value. And something, if it's so good, clear, so profitable, why don't we see other transmission companies doing the same level that you do? And why don't you do more? Well, before answering, I would like to say this was a question during coffee break. Some investors asked me this, and I thank those here with us posing this question. And the answer is now. You're not giving us the spoiler. No. Well, this type of investment is an opportunity consecrated on a specific type of concession, which are those legacy concessions, renewed contract in 012. Therefore, there are not many companies that have this. By the way, concessionaires with concessions in a form bid today during auctions, they don't want. They have punctual reinforcements here and there, but nothing at this level. So we are talking about 6 business groups in Brazil that have this type of concession. We part of these 6 groups. And why don't we do more? Well, this question is for you. Well, good morning. Well, to do more reinforcements, improvements, obviously would be better when we talk about reliability, as Bruno mentioned, but also understand some limitations imposed by the system. When you're working, and I will share with you data now, we have approximately hours and 140 substations. This means that almost half of our installations, they have some work being done now. So this means we have need deconnection. We are not saying that reinforcement improvement projects is like having a car and you changing the tires while it's running. Well, what does it mean? There are some limitations imposed by the system that while the time being, it's not allowed to have more disconnection for the project. So this means we're like this. So you cannot overcome this. So we are working closely with ONS to make feasible some options that allows us to disconnect when necessary. Additionally, we implemented some technologies in working fashion in order to be able to work with voltage or bringing base move. So likewise, we surely during the next years will be able to execute more than what we are executing now, better saying. Now, what are chattels? Chattels for the non-engineers. What are chattels? Well, chattels, I'm talking about, let's say, equipment connecting a line of a transformer, and there where you're doing the change of a piece of equipment. So you need to disconnect. When we talk about chattels, it means that I can bring an equipment modular that I connect in a provisorily in parallel while I do the work. So the mortise, so I can place here, do the work here, and then disconnect, connect here, do the work here, and disconnect, like if it was a pivot from one side to the other. So that's how we can manage to work. Thank you, guys. Now, in addition to support and improvements, I ask about greenfield project. How do you update it? You disclosed it yesterday about it. Well, before starting with bidding projects, I would like to stress the portfolio of Isotep is made of reinforcement, improvements, and bidding. The reinforcements and improvements, until last month, we have monetized almost 63 undertaking and exchanging 5,000, replacing 1,500 pieces of equipment. As Claudio mentioned, keeping our remuneration basis. We have, in addition to assets, we need to do our operations. And when we enter the bidding side of things, the portfolio is made up 7 undertakings. Rúdio mentioned to put intimation 9B. Of the 7 undertakings, 5 are underway. We have Piraquê, Água Vermelha, Jacarandá, Riacho, and Minuano. Minuano project is the one we are developing over there in Rio Grande do Sul. Recently, we energized the first phase, and by the end of the year, it will be the second phase. And then we will have the RAP 100%. In this moment, 50% of the RAP, as we mentioned, that was the phase 1, was energized. So now for Riacho Grande project, downwards, upwards. Riacho Grande is the undertaking that we are executing here in São Paulo. It's one that has underground line in downtown the city until São Caetano do Sul. The undertaking is going very well. We are almost 75% moved forward. Overhead stretch will be energized by the end of the year, beginning of January. The underground stretch is underway now, beyond 75%, and we started launching underground cable substation. We will have a new one named São Caetano do Sul, under the being set up phase, moving according to planning. Jacarandá project is a smaller project with increasing the substation, and I will soon show you some pictures. We recently obtained the license and started the earth movement. Água Vermelha also has a license here in the state of São Paulo, in the border with Minas Gerais state. Now we are wrapping up earth movement and doing civil works and starting the phase of setting up equipment. And according to the project, like Água Projeto, it will be energized the beginning of the year. Piraquê is one of the macro projects we are executing. We have 3 projects that are bigger. Piraquê, Itateada e Serra Dourada. Piraquê, we obtained the environmental license last August. We start the stretch of Minas Gerais obtaining license, most of it in the state of Minas Gerais and a smaller part in the estado do Espírito Santo. Espírito Santo, we are waiting for the license by the end of December to start in January, February to energize. As Minas Gerais license was obtained last August. We mobilize all the works at this moment. We have more 300 towers cemented, and we are heading towards very well. Substations are in the phase of earth movements, starting civil works and heading towards according to our planning. So now we have approximately 2,500 individuals working there. Approximately reinforcement improvements could be approximately 4,000, 5,000 employees now working, and in the next months will keep on growing.
We just have now 2 projects of Itacheai and Serra Dourada missing. Itacheai is a project that connects Minas Gerais state all the way to Rio de Janeiro, and the project is in the licensing phase. We estimate that we're going to have the public meetings in the first semester of the next year, as we forecasted, and we're doing the topography and field work and the negotiation of the properties and CPUs. And the micro project, we have the Serra Dourada project, which is a project which connects from Bahia all the way to Minas Gerais, which is a very big work also. Itacheai is about 500 kilometers. Piraquê is 1,000 kilometers. So you have an idea of the size. And Serra Dourada is also going as planned. And last month we had public audiences, public meetings, where we are having licensing meetings with IBAMA for one of the parts. And so going according to plan, and we are waiting for licensing the first semester of the next year. And now the second part, Bruno. So as per this, our projects are following through as planned. Thanks so much, Aaron. We brought some images here of the projects. Excuse me. Here we have some images of the project. Here in Minuano, we're showing the part where we are launching, or not where we're launching, but we're finishing the cabling. And Água Vermelha, which I talked to you guys about, where we're ready in the civil construction. And then we have the station of São Caetano do Sul and G's, where we already started the phase of setting up. Things are going very well also. Jacarandá, this is something that already exists, and now we're doing ampliations on the left side, on the upper left side. We're increasing it. We have the Piraquê project in the left side. This picture shows one of the work sites. The same way we have this site, we have 9 sites like this, 6 on this size, and as you guys can see, this is very, very big. We have a total of 6 of this, which are already mobilized, 6 of 9, and then we have the Capelinha site, which is being developed now. and you can see the magnitude of the sites. And like I told you guys, Itatiaia and Serra Dourada projects are in the licensing phases. Thank you, Bruno. And Dyron, can the market wait for an average anticipation and a capex efficiencies? And now, according to the history of the company, here you guys talk about 7 months of anticipation and about 35% in regards to the capex for these projects. Can we expect something like that? Thank you, Bruno. Effectively, our constructions are going towards anticipation and efficiency of the capex according to our business case project. So we're going to having improvement anticipation as was planned. Perfect. Thanks so much. And so for now, we've only talked about investment. So who talked about 5 billion for reinforcement and improvements, 9 billion for greenfield, and we've been growing the following years. In investment, we're talking about how the leverage is going to be and what are the other projects that the company has. Well, naturally, with all of this investment pipeline that we have to do, and with our premise of maintenance of the distribution of dividends, which is a minimum of 75% of the regulatory liquid income, leverage is going to increase in the next few years. Now, we go from a very healthy base if we consider which we've been growing year by year, and the leverage is very controlled as we close September with a liquid that's in the EBITDA and then the calculation methodology of the BNDES, which is the only one we have presently. This cogna we have is of 3 times of this indicator, and we've had all the conversations and waivers of BNDES. We have a very good dialogue with BNDES. And in the last case, we could always prepay this debt because it's of 650 million reais. So it would be a B plan, but we don't foresee any difficulties in having another waiver. So continuing along the side of this question, you comment. So you're not going to diminish the P object. I think it's important. The P objects won't be diminished. No, we have a premise of great growth, but with maintenance of the payout of our practice of 75% of the liquid income of the regulatory income. So even looking at our history, we had superior payouts in the past where we had a small investment level. But with the increase of the investments, we are more consistent in the 75% range, which is a commitment which we have. And still in the dividends, one thing a question I receive every day is, why don't you distribute more frequently and only once a year? I knew you were going to ask this. This is a question we receive often. And since I've been sitting in this chair, it's been 5 months, and I've already reflected a lot about this. And I always go back to 2 commitments, main commitments we had at this moment. One is to deliver growth. So we need the funding that supports this business plan, and not to put in risk this 75% risk payout. So we don't want to put this at risk. So in our forecast of the next few years would be very intensive, and when it comes to investment, to commit ourselves to a specific frequency removes liberty for the cash management, which may be useful to get the best market window when we're going to capture or to do the day-to-day management. Having said this, and also because I would like to take upon myself something which we will eventually have to give a step back. So having said this, we haven't outruled that if we see a moment or a possible condition or if there is the possibility of us doing more distribution or of profits or doing it in different installments, and if this supports our investments and our payout level, we might do it. Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. I like to understand other things. When we talk about investment, we talked about investment, we talk about dividends, and we talked about this profitable growth you talked about. So we didn't participate of the last 3 transmission bids, and why didn't you participate? If it was this non-participation, is it related to leverage, to the leverage increase that is forecast, or if you guys didn't see interesting characteristics on these bids and the perspective of the company to come to participate of bids like in June 2025, like Victor talked about. What are you guys seeing when it comes to this? Okay, you made a lot of questions. Let me see if I can answer all of them. If I skip any, let me know. So going back to the profitability of the bids, I believe that when we don't study the specific lots, it's difficult for us to estimate the profitability because the level of competition we have today, it's very linked to us doing anticipations, efficiencies to overcome the NL standards. And we're only going to know this when we actually do a detailed analysis, do quotations, investigate all the tax benefits that there may exist. So that's why we even understand the difficulty which the market has of calculating or estimating any profitability, because the fact is that only with public information of NL parameters isn't trivial to get the defective business plan of who took the plan forward. So now, why didn't we participate? It was for financial discipline, because we already have a pipeline. So in the base date of June 2024, in the cycle, in this tax cycle, and this cut in September 2024, we have 14 billion to get all the way to 2029. So this is hired, and we have to deliver in the way we planned with the profitability of when we went to the bid. We don't want to mess in the dividends practice, so 75%. Now, to make this happen, we have to have financial discipline. So you can only do this with a solid balance, with a robust cash flow, which we do have, with an interesting margin. And with this discipline, so we can keep the cost of income, and which is attractive and which brings a lot of competition capability when we do these new projects. So we're talking about a leverage of 80% of our bid projects. So it's a premise which makes a lot of difference when you're going to bid. And for you guys to have an idea, the last capturing we did in October, we captured 1.8 billion into series of 12, 15 years of deadlines. So one was was the same NTNB cost without any spread. And the other one was a negative spread of 10 bips. So this has a lot of value, and we have to preserve this. So we have to dose rhythm of these investments. So for the next bids of transmission, batteries, so we're going to focus on this, and when we get new opportunities, we're going to assess in the same parameter. And for next year, we have only one transmission bid forecast, which would be in the second semester, besides the batteries, which was already talked about in June. Okay, you went through all of them. Perfect, thank you. I didn't forget any. Now, Hui, I'd like to ask you something. There are some transmitters which have a projection of revenue loss for the end of this decade due to some concessions that will end I like to talk about Energia Brasil's concessions. How do you guys see this? Thank you, Bruno. Well, we talked about we have two types of concessions: renewed concessions. There are a few, and the bids. There are 30-year bids, 30-year concessions, and after 30 years, this concessions would go back to be rebidded in a new base, since the investment was already amortized. In our portfolio, in the 35 concessions, which will be 34 when we deliver FSC, which is a concession which is less than 0.5% of our income and which ends now in the end of the next year. We don't have anything relevant which ends before the end of the next decade. We have some relevant ones for 38. So we are not worried when we're looking at the horizon because although some companies are worried about this. The question that frequently comes our way is if these concessions can be renewed. I think they might be renewed in a rebid process, but in a new base because the income, the profitability of these concessions are paying for investments which were done in the line of these new concessions. So a rebid would be to pay maintenance, operation, and some investment, updating investment. There's scenarios, no worries in the short and mid range. So this is it. And on a less operational theme, not when it comes to investment, but we know that the financial component of the RBSL is being questioned in ANEL. And it went through a director's meeting where they asked for a mixed vote. And we would like to know what's the company's expectation of the deadline for this mixed vote and what's the impact of this vote, of the vote that was said by the ex-director and now which was consignated, if it's going to be supported by the new directors. Do you start, Claudio, or you? Okay, here we're talking about RBSC. When the financial RBSC was defined back then, there was a group of two associations and one company which came in with a questioning of two things. Basically, the way it would be paid, if it was a unique flow or two flows, and the way that the interest of this flow would be charged, if it would be the same or not according to the RB payment method. This was stated in Mozart and Elvo's directors. They stayed with them for a long time for them to decide. And the last day, in his day of his agency, he said his vote. In that meeting, only he said his votes. And then they asked to revisit this. It's not a simple theme. I believe and I trust in the agency and the corporate governance of the agency and the governance of the agency that this theme will be treated with all due attention. We've been giving them lots of information and different arguments for them to make the best decision, and we have no expectation of when they might bring this back to the meeting. They're taking their time, so they make the best decision as possible and can be appreciated by other directors, which will then declare and ask for their time of analysis according to their need. I don't know if you'd like to compliment anything, Claude. No, I think you talked about what we needed. And I'd like to say that Director Alvil's vote was in his last date, and he left the NL directors, and he left it and consignated. Whoever replaces him, the director, can their vote replace Alvil's director's vote? And if there's some kind of tie in a decision, how does the decision stay? Is there a tiebreaker vote? How does this happen? In this specific process, the director Alvio, before he finished, his vote is valid. The other four directors now have the opportunity to vote. So a new director wouldn't replace Alvio's place. His vote's already done for. Now, as a rule in ANEL, you don't have a tie of 2-2. every decision needs to have at least three directors voting, and this for any process within the agency. Now, another theme which also had a very recent movement and hadn't been talked about for a long time was a team of Cefas. So recently, you guys communicated that as Energia went into a negotiation process with the farm secretary in São Paulo, and there's some process in STJ, which is the Supreme Justice Court, and there's some details here. This agreement, why you guys are trying to do this agreement, who forwarded this, what's being discussed, what is the agreement that the company could accept, and how are these negotiations happening? How are they right now? Let me first explain what this is topic, which some people call Cefas, some people call 4829. There was a bill which gives the employees from the old SESC, which came to the company in 1988, if I'm not mistaken, that they would have a similar treatment as public employees, so they could have their full contracts, and they would have a certain right, and the state of São Paulo would pay their retirement for a long time. Some time in the 90s, they started cutting down on these payments. They would say, I couldn't pay beyond the ceiling of what a governor receives, or I can't pay this or that item of people's payments. So these retirees were able to receive in the legal system somehow that we would complement their retirements. And we've been doing this. At the same time, we went into the legal system with we wanted to charge the state for this value, because this has nothing to do with the company.
Value in the receivables of the company against the Treasury Office. They call this Cefas, by some Cefas, 2.5 billion reais. And we are collecting this value on the second court, resort court. And additionally, we have 200 million expense in the subject. And what we are requesting to have this resource reimbursed by the Treasury Office. In this action filed in the Supreme Court, there's a proposal by the Minister of the Supreme Court saying why the parties don't search for an agreement, let's say, a path that can allow this subject not to be judged here at the chamber, that is not going to be necessarily good for both parties. We thought, why not? It makes sense to sit down and talk. So we stayed the process for 70 days. Now it's in a chamber of mediation within the Supreme Court. There's a mediator to be chosen soon. Support the debate, looking to do it right. Honestly, I don't know how it will move forward, this debate, striving towards something that makes sense and uphold the value of the company. If in 180 days we don't reach an agreement, we go back to where we were now. Judged by the Minister of the Supreme Court, it's an important subject that can represent both the recovery of this value or part of this in the receivables account, as well partial total reduction of this resource every year and by disbursing to add to the pension. So we will pay the due attention because it can generate lots of value for the company. Thank you for the answer. Now, my last question before opening to all. July, Eletrobras did a follow-on where they obtained the preferential shares of the company, and this offer, there's a cap period of recuperation where you could do new selling. That was 90 days. Markup ended 10 days ago. So I'd like to understand with you when Eletrobras will do a new offer. The answer for this question, you have to ask them, right? Shares are in the hands of Eletrobras. And in this slide, we are sharing, we have the stake they have in the company. So ISA has almost 90% of common shares and 35% of total capital, and Eletrobras 85.8 dropped to 26. They expressed their interest back then that when they did a follow-on, that they would keep on to unblock part of the shares. It's block of the shares in the issue of the compulsory loan. It's a legal issue of Eletrobras. At a certain time, they would sell those actions they can unblock. But it's all we know. And what we are very satisfied or highly satisfied, not Eletrobras selling the shares because they're an excellent shareholder and we have a long-term relationship, but selling Eletrobras shares brought more netability to the company. Before selling, we entered the Ibovespa, we resorted to Ibovespa, and their shares brought more netability for the papers in addition to increase our netability opposition on the Ibovespa, generating a passive demand of investors. So we see it with good eyes, this movement, with no anxiety and knowledge of when they're going to do it. Okay, now these were the questions drawn by us. And in fact, we have one more. We have a question everybody posed. I forgot to pose it, but I will do it now. But jokes aside, I open the question to all. And the attendees, those who want to pose a question, raise your hands and the mic will go to you. And those who want to pose questions through the online platform, again, through the official platform of this event, access the QR code and then you'll be directed to the platform or the link on the YouTube enrollment. So while we wait, any questions by the attendees? We have one there. Apologize. Before posing the question, please identify yourself and your organizations. Well, good morning, Daniel Travitz from Safra Bank. Thank you for the opportunity. You went through all the key subjects. So my question is more thinking about the expectation ahead of us, batteries capability bidding. I would like to understand if you could address further how do you assess the competitive scenario for the batteries bidding or auction, and a bit about how much you think is going to be the size of this auction. It will help us to think about the outlook. Well, let's go. The auction for batteries. We followed this subject with lots of interest for some time and waiting for its evolvement regarding regulation. I think this auction is quite expected, but the current status, as Victor mentioned during his presentation, we still have some guidelines that were placed for public consultation, but we didn't see the outcome of this consultation and what will truly arise from it. So the size of the auction. So what we see is the need of tension that was placed in the planning disclosed by EP. But how much this will work for hydrothermal batteries, we don't know. I think it's too early to say. And also regarding the economics, how it will be the competition. We haven't yet reached the stage to be able to calculate this. We are talking just about regulatory criteria, mechanics, and more, let's say, more structuring. How many hours the battery would have to work, minimum size, 4 hours it was placed there. Now, I think it's too early to share a guess about this system. More questions over there? Good morning, Luis, analyst of Itaú BBA Bank. Just a follow-up on the question by Daniel regarding batteries auction. It called our attention regarding the preliminary conditions, although the auction forecasted for next year, the product would be put into retail operation in 2029. Understanding a bit your contribution in the public consultation phase, do you think this is something to be changed because the system currently needs more flexibility and catering the point? Second question, not related to this. Well, this is an optimum point. We contributed in this sense because this future line of auction in 25 put it in motion 29, it seems not to make sense for batteries. We guided our project in 1 year to have a benchmark of reference, and also it generates uncertainty regarding indexation and capex contract. If you do a work in 1 year, but you need mass and engage now and incur in the risk and affecting your profitability on the investment, the remuneration is just ahead, or is staying the risk for the variation of capex up to then. I think these are not optimum scenario. The contribution we made is, if this date is truly in 2029, to make clear in the invitation to bid the terms of the auction, if it's indexation and remuneration, if there will be remuneration. So each component proposing party will do its indication, and otherwise, if the need is just in 29, the auction could happen ahead of us and not now. That's clear. The second question, absolutely different from this subject, but more regarding dividends. You were quite clear in stressing that you want to uphold the payout in 75%. My question is specifically regarding the year of 2024. Will you adopt a similar strategy for the last year's strategy using accrued reserves of previous years? Please, an idea about this amount, how much this dividend can be paid through JCP. Well, we will adopt the same strategy of last year. First, we will use all the possibility JCP of the exercise same fiscal year, and this year will be quite relevant because IRFS, the basis, we had an outcome that was important by RTP. And also complement using the inventories balance. We have approximately 1 billion, 100, 200. So the expectation is to be 100% IJCP. Just two questions online, joining both in one because they're similar. João Pedro and Fernando Barbosa. I would like to understand if the company's brand will change its governance or the controlling shareholder, and if it intentions to migrate to the market. Well, I can answer, and you, Sylvia, you can add. Well, I stress what I said at the beginning, which is brand change has to do with the evolvement of the company now, not seen as an old brand, but understand that a new brand is Energia Brazil, is more fair to what we are doing and plan to keep on doing. We don't want to enter generation nor distribution. We want to contribute with something important with energy transition and with no changes in governance, both related to the controlling shareholder ISA has with ISA Energia Brazil, as well as any change in our governance regarding B3. No forecast of any changes. Thank you. Well, good morning. My name is Carlos, individual investor. I would like to know how, Sylvia, as she said, we are having more competition in power delivery and more efficiency to uphold ourselves in this auction. Do you believe with time this might remove other companies from the auction that don't have good efficiency? And do you have any project for educational content, regarding the company? I will start with the first part. Well, in fact, this auction competition fosters and prizes those that are more efficient, that truly deliver what they propose. So it ends by being cycled. Now and then we have newcomers and entrepreneurs that make some errors at some point and leaving the market. Now, there's a certain list of traditional utilities that are recurrently participating of this game and understand how it works out. So at least this competition of traditionals will keeps on being consistent. But sometimes there are those that drop out in the middle of the path. And I would like to stress that some bidding in B3, they think the power delivery is winning at B3. Winning B3 auction is the easiest thing worldwide. Just leave money on the table. The difficult part of it, it's winning the auction of B3, doing a lot of study beforehand, engage all your equipment, knowing deeply the engineering solution. And once with the contract, fastly you can do the environmental licensing, looking for the plot of lands for the transmission lines, and deliver with the lowest risk possible. So it's technical and risk management. This is not for any company. We see many in the history of the power delivery history, they entered not informed. They thought it was simple and they burned their fingers. So the competition is on growing. I wouldn't say that growing. I would say competition. There's a group of companies, highly professional, that have been present permanently. Now, answering the second question, company educational content, we already felt this need increasingly more, explaining specific subjects regarding of his Energia in this line. But until May current year, we did a workshop in-house to talk about periodic tariff review, how it works, the key aspect. This presentation is available in our website, and we also set up a calculator to help the modeling and price tariffs and future tariffs according to the value of the company. And also here we will tape a series, now we start here at B3, to serve shareholders, shed light on their doubts, and answer more straightforwardly and consistent to what they ask. We are working on this. We started and we will evolve. Suggestions are always welcome. So let us know what you thought about it. One more question. I will like two questions by Gustavo Sobrinho. It was posted online. Related. Given the press of leverage, M&A operation, and the other question, the same line, do you consider the possibility of acquisition or selling controlled companies jointly? Well, M&A transaction operations, we are always assessing opportunities that add value. So, as we see our role, we have a portfolio of 35 concessions, next year, 34, and we manage this portfolio. Perhaps it makes sense, some rotation, optimization, and we will search, see where we have good conditions for this. If it makes sense to find conditions that make sense, I think we will assess. But we don't have M&A targets, not in this sense, because in fact, these are movements that are customized depending on counterparts and circumstances, and finding the way that we reach the value. With this, we can do it. Otherwise, we don't. More questions? Well, we have another question here, which is we should tap this and explore BSC. So, Leo posed a question. Some analysts are projecting the payment of EBC economic component beyond 2028 as a reference to the figures of ANEL published on the tariff review. In this sense, the Energy has this optimist point of view. Economic component. It's not optimist, it's a reality.
The economic component arrives till 2042, and it starts losing value because it appreciates, but it goes all the way to 2042 when the fair value, who we also showed in the graphic. It shows the composition of the cycle, and we see in the orange one, if I remember correctly, and there is a value into 2028. It goes through 32, 38, and goes all the way to 42. I think it's worth it, Claudio, to go back to the concept. So RBC is a remuneration for the non-depreciated assets that we had in 2012. But this value in the 2012 wasn't paid since 2012. It started being paid a little bit afterwards. And so the non-depreciated assets, which will receive this remuneration, since it delayed a while to be paid, it's what we call the financial component, which had to be paid in 8 years. It's been paid in a little bit more of a longer deadline, but it's what we call the financial component. So we have two components: the financial, which is a compensation for them having taken long for being paid, for the economic, and then the economic component, which is the end of the depreciation of the asset. Is that right? Yes. Including there's a residual 442 with a right for indemnization. And in properties, for example, there will be some indemnity. Yes, and this is counting value. Okay, last question. Well, since we don't have any more questions and we're getting to the end of our time, I'd like to thank for everyone for coming, for the flexibility and your interest in following through our Investor Day here in Energia. And I'd like to enforce that this presentation will be available in the investor site, and you guys can access it. Any other questions you might have, you can send us via email, and we're available to answer you. I'd like to ask everyone to do fill out our resource form here so we can improve the content, material, dynamic. This is very important for us to bring to you what you want to listen to, what you want to hear, what you want to receive. And we'd like also to comment that all the transmission of this event are being compensated in the sense of following through with creating positive social and environmental impact. So I'd like to say that we're closing the event now. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Now we're going to have exclusive talk with the press. I'd like to thank everyone who was able to come. There's a gift here for everyone in the way out. Thank you for coming. Excuse me. I'd also like to call Janaína Ribeiro to mediate the dynamic now.